Great. So I'm very happy to say that our Community Climate Action Plan by and for disabled people in Bristol is now published. Thank you to everyone who shared your great ideas towards the plan and to all the volunteers who helped pull it together. On this slide, which I spent last year carrying around the streets of Bristol. So I invited disabled people to sit with me, drink a cup of tea and tell me their ideas for how Bristol can act on climate change in ways that are good for disabled people. For those of you who haven't heard of the plan, it was created as part of the Community Climate Action Plan project, which has helped 6 communities in Bristol create their own action plans on climate change, supported by the Bristol Green Capital Partnership and the Centre for Sustainable Energy and the Council. I'm sure, as lots of you will already know, this is really important because disabled people are one of the groups who are most hurt by climate change, and we can be excluded by climate action that doesn't include us. So I'm sure lots of you have heard about the straw ban and how it did little to lower waste, but created really big and problematic barriers for lots of disabled people. But we believe that change can be a big opportunity, however. So half of disabled people in Bristol say that their quality of life is adequate and worse, and I'm sure you all know about lots of the barriers that are there. And if we can use this time of change to get rid of those barriers and create projects that are good for disabled people, then hopefully we can create good change around this. So I'm just going to let a few more people in. So on to the next slide. So yes, our plan was co-produced with disabled people across Bristol. This meant that we brought disabled people together with experts to come up with ideas. Doing this during the pandemic was difficult, but we did our best to get around this. So we had the sofa stalls and we went through community groups, we knocked on doors, made a project video that we mailed to people, ran a survey and ran what we called sharing sessions, where we brought together experts on subjects together with disabled people. And on this slide, we've got a picture of a picnic that we did for one of those sessions on food. It'd be really great if you would read the plan after this session. We have an easy read and a BSL version and an accessible PDF. And once I've stopped talking, I'll put the link in the chat. But for now, I wanted to give a very quick overview of some of the themes. So people had really great ideas and we split these in 2 for our plan. The first are projects that we want to run as the Bristol Disability Equality Forum. So these projects are run by disabled people to fix mobility aids. And the photo on this slide shows like a repair cafe. So the idea of that would be to stop mobility aids just going straight to landfill and making sure that disabled people can access them for cheap prices. We also want to hire what we're calling climate champions, so such as someone to help people who need help switching energy providers or accessing grants. We want to run an accessible allotment to show Bristol what best practice looks like. We want to run accessibility audits on parks and pavements. We want to run accessible cookery lessons to learn how to make food that is good for the planet and disabled people. And we also want to make sure that we share our learnings to other cities, because first, Community Climate Action Plan for disabled people. So we want to see this all across the country and, you know, preferably the world as well. We're going to need the help of people to make this happen. So if you're interested in any of these projects, I'd love you to get in touch. So my email is cca.bristoldef@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the chat later. But also, as well as these projects that we're doing, a lot of the changes need to come from people who have the power and money. So we think it's the responsibility of the council and other businesses in Bristol to make some of these asks happen. So we're going to be pushing for those changes. So they're kind of like a full list in the plan, but I'll just run through the main themes now. So the first one, it's really important that disabled people are included from the start. And this slide shows a photo of the lovely people from Paul's Place telling me their ideas. So we need to be part of the city's plans from beginning to end. It's no good creating plans and then only bringing us in to fix them once they're done. And we'd really like to make this happen through a reference group of people with different impairments being created so that they can be there for every step of the plan and how it's made. Secondly, it's really important to get rid of existing barriers. So action. So we need things like accessible new builds, pavements, cycle lanes, public transport, allotments, parks, jobs, and information, training and resources, and enough public toilets. So, for example, for many disabled people to be able to drive less, we need pavements to actually be accessible. So that's things like flatter surfaces, stopping cars parking on them, stopping cyclists and e-scooters using them, and stopping shops and blocking them. Thirdly, it's really important that we're not punished for not doing things that we physically can't. So, for example, Bristol wants more people to drive less and walk, cycle and use public transport more. And this is obviously great, but if you're a person who can't do those things, it's really important that they're kind of people's ability to travel isn't limited. So we need things like grants, so people can access cars that are better for the planet, and research on how to make low car cities work for this. This is a event on nature. I'm just also going to quickly go a bit more into our specific nature asks. So firstly, we want disabled people to be able to access parks and other places with nature. So that means things like getting rid of barriers to parks or letting people access them with a key card. And we want parks in easy reach of for disabled people. We also want disabled people to be able to access nature in spaces that they already own or visit. So this might mean things like planters or pots that can go on windowsills. And thirdly, we want the council to clean up Bristol's air so it meets World Health Organization rules. This will mean that the health of those with breathing impairments is improved, and it will stop more people from becoming disabled.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what we'll be doing is to support us and more inclusive. And we also want to make sure that we're thinking about hopefully getting a green, like a parks accessibility audit team who would look at parks and see how they can be made more accessible. Yeah, so working on this project has shown how important it is to listen to disabled people on climate change. We've got an awful lot to gain through this and a lot to lose if we're not listened to. So it's really important that action is taken. And whether those changes are good or bad will be decided by how they're made. So we're asking everyone who's taking action on climate change in Bristol to use this plan to make sure that changes are good and accessible. I'm finishing with a photo of us with our banner that reads "Make the future green and accessible" in front of City Hall for that reason. I wanted to finish by saying that many disabled people I talk to have very little trust in those with power. I think that's important to acknowledge. And one of the comments we were told most often was that you're dreamers. And of course, I really understand this view, but I also want to say, is being a dreamer bad? Because to dream is to look at what is and see what could be. And what we have now is bad for both disabled people and the planet. So if we want a future in which disabled people can be safe and happy, then Bristol. So our plan is 2 asks to people with power in Bristol. Please show us that we can trust you to make the necessary changes. And we need allies with time, access to money, and people can make things happen. And we really want to work with you. And to disabled people, we can make Bristol better if lots of us come together and make those dreams real. So yeah, please work with us. Please be part of the change. So thank you for listening. I'm going to give 5 minutes to have a few questions if anybody has them, and then I'm going to hand over to our wonderful panelists because I think I've done enough speaking. But does anybody have any questions for now on that side of the presentation? Sorry, just trying to bring up the...
Am I?
So I've got the translators. I can't. Sorry, I've got things pinned. Oh, Carol, you've got a question, is that right? Oh, you muted.
I think Helen was before me.
Oh,
Had her
sorry,
hand up
I've
before
only
me.
got a tiny screen at the top, so I can't really see who's got their hands up. So Helen, do you want to go?
Is that okay? So I'm Helen, and I'm representing an organisation called Disabled Women Take Action. And one of the big, we're running a campaign at the moment about pavement obstructions. So the fact that actually lots of clutter in the pavement, such as wheelie bins and everything else, gets in people's way. Now, is the work you're doing looking very much more at an environment, or is it the whole nature, or is it the whole landscape, the whole environment of pavement obstructions? Is that relevant to the work you're doing?
Very much so. I mean, I think the thing about climate change and nature is, are they separate from everything, really? Climate change affects all of our lives, and that's why things like important pavements are important for us to take action on. So we'd love to work with you on that if that's something you'd be interested in.
I'm really fortunate the fact that I'm already in touch with Dan, who was here, someone I can't see where he is, and Ruth, who we're all going to hear from later, is very much involved with me as well. So hopefully there will definitely be ways which we can link in together.
Brilliant. Carol.
Hello, everybody. I work for Lancashire Wildlife Trust, and it's a new project around Morecambe Bay, helping people access nature, connecting with other people after the pandemic, and hopefully people will connect with nature and want to look after it. I've been asked, as part of my role, to organise some events, and I can choose whatever I like, and I really wanted to include people with disabilities. I've never done it before, and we work on a beach, Fleetwood Beach. I do, and my other colleagues work on different beaches around the bay, and we have I haven't been yet, but there's a place that hires out for free wheelchairs that are accessible on the beach. I just wondered if anybody had used any of those, what their experiences were, and any help and advice really to, include everybody.
Amazing. It sounds a good project. Perhaps if anybody has any thoughts, you could put them in the chat. And Carol, if you ever want to drop me an email, I can see if there's any DPOs I can link you up with in your local area.
Thank you.
Great. I think we have time for one more question before going on to the panelists, and if anybody had one, I'm just going to flip through. Can't see any more hands up, so I'm going to go on to our brilliant panelists now. So yes, nature is important for our health and our well-being and for the health of our planet, but disabled people are often excluded from it. Our four panelists are going to explore the problem, its importance, and what we can do to enable disabled people to access more nature. So we're going to start with a few questions from me, and then open it up to all of you. But first of all, let me introduce you to amazing panelists I'm very happy to have with us today. So first we have Ruth Naughty, who's a Black and Green ambassador and has been that since September 2001. Her interests within the environmental sector include access to green spaces for parents with young families, particularly disabled parents. She's also interested in disabled people's connection to nature and whether this has changed since the COVID-19 pandemic. Then we have Sarah Bell, who is a lecturer in health geography at the University of Exeter. Her research is on wellbeing, disability, and social inclusion in nature. In the Sensing Nature project, Sarah worked with people with sight impairment to understand more about inclusion in different types of nature. She has also worked with the RSBP, WWT, National Trust, and Forestry England to make sure that disability is thought about in nature accessing inclusion. We've got Charlie Bennett, who's the CEO at Your Park, Bristol and Bath. Your park has been conducting research to understand the experiences of local disabled people and their carers when using Bristol parks. They also run regular activities to support local people to spend time in nature close to home. Then we have Dan Borton, who works for the Bristol Disability Equality Forum, where he runs roll and stroll sessions, helping disabled people in Bristol to get out into nature. And he also runs the forum's Making Change Happen daily gatherings. So I'm just going to give each of our panelists a bit of a chance to introduce themselves. So Ruth, would you like to say anything more?
Hi Ruth, you're on mute.
So I am, thank you for that. I was just rabbiting on to myself. What I was saying is that I am currently a Black and Green ambassador in Bristol. For those people that don't know, Black and Green is a partnership with Ujiba Radio station in Bristol and Bristol Green Capital Partnership. And our aim is to increase the diversity within the environmental justice sector. So that's making sure that people from underrepresented groups, particularly people from ethnic minority backgrounds, are better represented within the sector. And we have a monthly radio show, so we kind of highlight what's going on in Bristol and across the country and also across the world, things that Black and brown people are doing within the climate change sector, and also just telling people that listen to the station why they should be interested in climate change, how it will affect them, and what they can actually do to make a difference. So my main interest within climate change and this sector, the reason I came to it was because I've always had, so I'm disabled myself, so I've got a vision impairment, and I like getting out, so I love getting out into nature, but I always find that I do come across access issues. So the reason I joined Black and Green was to sort of see what I could do and be more active within the sector, to see how I can sort of increase accessibility for disabled people and also for Black people as well. Because Emma mentioned, disabled people are going to be one of the groups that are going to be most affected by climate change, and the same for people with ethnic minorities. So put the two together, then people, Black disabled people are going to be really affected. So I want to see what I could do to actually make a difference. And I also have a background of working within disability charities, mainly in Wales. So that's what kind of brought me to hopefully bring my skills to Black and Green, doing that extra element of disability within, for people that are from ethnic minorities. So that's me.
Thanks, Ruth, that's amazing. Sarah, do you want to say a bit?
Yes, great. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really lovely to be part of the session and to hear more about the Community Climate Action Plan as well. Congratulations for getting that launched. It's amazing. So to give some background, I'm a researcher at the University of Exeter. Been here about 10 years or so, but I'm based a bit further down southwest in Truro in Cornwall. And most of my research has been exploring people's experiences of health and well-being with nature in its broadest form. So, from when you move outside and experience the weather to being in the garden or parks, woodlands, countryside, coast, the whole shebang. And my work's had a particular focus on what supports those experiences and what undermines them, and how we can promote more disability inclusive opportunities to access and be with nature in ways that have the potential to benefit. And in 2016 I started a 2-year research project which was called Sensing Nature, and I was working in close collaboration with people with sight impairment from a whole range of different kind of backgrounds and histories. And I remember one participant saying, the built environment, bearing in mind it was built by human beings for human beings, is increasingly excluding blind and visually impaired people. So this participant highlighted how the built environment and the many parks, gardens and woodlands that are embedded within that environment is often only really designed and managed with almost a subset of people in mind, and that can create real access barriers. So part of the work was about trying to understand, what are those barriers and how can we dismantle them? How can we start to think about disability and nature differently? And I remember another participant saying, I'm just sharing quotes because I think sometimes they resonate more, but this participant said, for me, the wonderful thing about nature is when I can step to a place where I can be free in my body and be quiet, but just with different noise, with natural, well, I say natural noise, but bird song, trees, being able to hear a river or the sound of a river nearby, different smells. It kind of makes me straighten up and feel less vulnerable, funnily enough. Whereas the concrete and scaffolding and crowds and cars, lorries going past, people revving, all that tension, people, emotional tension as well, people yelling at their kids or calling out after each other or car doors slamming, it's very wearing. So just to have a time when you can just be really free in the body, to not have that constant anxiety about what's going to happen next. And that was something that for her, in the right types of nature environments where access had been considered, it was a place where that sense of freedom could happen. And so really everything I've been doing since that project has been about trying to develop partnerships with a range of disability and nature-based organisations to try and create these collaborative opportunities to enable these more enriching experiences, and particularly to try and encourage a shift away from this tendency to frame disability as almost just an access need, and instead recognising it as this opportunity for shared learning and creativity and just thinking about things differently. I'll stop there because otherwise I'll ramble, but I hope we'll come back to it in the questions. But yeah, thank you.
Not rambling at all, Sarah, it's beautiful. Is Charlie here? I can't actually see you in the participants. If not, let's go on to Dan.
Hiya, I'm Dan Borton. I'm the outreach worker at the Bristol Disability Equality Forum. I also run our peer support community, and I run our Roll and Stroll walking group, which obviously is a great way for people to come together, not just for exercise, but also to talk. And it's interesting that actually being out in nature and being outdoors, you sometimes get different types of conversations than you would on a Zoom chat or even sitting across a table from somebody. And we're also working with Sustrans to help develop some accessible walking training, so that when other groups run walking groups, they will know some of the things that disabled people look out for, such as blocked pavements and lack of toilets, these sort of things. And we're also working with the Community Development Department for South Bristol, who are looking to develop and make the parks of South Bristol more accessible. So yeah.
Brilliant, thanks, Dan. I'm just going to see if I can pin all of our panelists to my screen to make this a bit more workable.
Well, currently we're central, but we will be east, and probably not Bristol anymore. Oh, shit.
Could I ask if you're not one of our panelists, could you mute yourself? Great, so I can't see Charlie in our participants, so we'll just launch in, but if you're there, Charlie, please do let me know. But yeah, so our first question is, why is inclusive nature important? I wonder if our panelists are kind of up for answering a question, if maybe you could like indicate in some way, so I'm not launching a nasty question on someone who doesn't want it. Bro, go for it, Ruth.
I think for me, it's really important. I think, disabled people, everybody has the right to access, nature and green spaces. It's important just to get out and have that option if you want to do that. And it's really good for our well-being as well. I think over the past couple of years with the pandemic and lockdowns, for me particularly, going out into a green space, so whether that's my local park, even just sometimes the bike path, just going out to that space and just hearing the birds and being surrounded by a little bit of greenery really, really helps and sort of detaches me from the other things that are going on in the world. So I think it's really important. It's our right to be able to access these green spaces if we want to do it.
Brilliant, yeah. Sarah, Dan?
I can add to it, I guess, just to reiterate, from the large and growing body of research around nature, health and well-being, we know that in the right context, it can promote opportunities for sense of perspective and peace and reflection and connection, whether that's with people or with animals who are perhaps less demanding sometimes. But it can be that sense of being able to move and move freely. But we also know that nature is uneven and it's changeable and it's unpredictable, and that many of those kind of disabling norms that permeate our other environments also permeate some of these nature settings. So I think, as Ruth said, it's a justice issue. You know, we should be able to get out into it. And I think, you know, I think, was it October last year? The UN Human Rights Council finally recognised the universal right to a healthy, universal healthy environment, and this is all part of that. So it's a massive justice consideration to be putting forward, I think.
Brilliant. Do you have anything you wanted to add, Dan, or I can go on to the next one?
I agree completely.
Brilliant. So what aspects of accessibility need to be considered? I know we had some great pointers in your introductions, but perhaps someone would like to go into a bit more depth.
What do you mean, sort of like things like block pavements, or?
Yeah, all of it, really.
I mean, that's just sort of like accessibility in the sort of lived environment, really. I mean, you know, for people to, before they even get to sort of cycle paths or parks, you know, just to not be, I think Valtrud said on the chat about sort of a lot of people do have problems just getting out their homes. And really, if we could make, you know, if the council could be more sort of considerate in how they plan things and take feedback from disabled people, you know, moving about the city and getting to the you know, green environment would be a lot easier for people.
I can go if
Yeah.
if that's you. I don't want to. Only if you finish, Dan.
That was a long full stop.
I've never like chaired a panel on Zoom before, so I'm very much like, oh, do I anyway? But please go for it.
No, that's fine. I know I often have long pauses, so I didn't want to cut in. But I think, you know, I think you're right. There's a huge number of like physical access considerations. So just getting to these places, and then when you're in a setting, you know, what is the physical quality of the site like, the path networks, the scale of it, the surface materials, the obstacles, how well it weathers over time. There's all that kind of physical side of things. And then, you know, for some of these bigger parks, there's also, what is the signage and interpretation accessible? You know, are they just relying on signs that they presume that everybody's going to be able to go and read, or have they thought about other formats, other, you know, sound? Are there people who work in the park? Can they communicate through BSL or Makaton? And then I think there's that bigger question of, what are the stories told about this site? You know, are they inclusive of people's experiences across a broad range of you know, priorities, and who's telling the stories, and are disabled people involved in telling the stories about what these parks are like and what they can be like? So I think there's kind of that physical access layer that often when people think about disability and nature access, that's what everyone focuses on, because it is really important. But I think to really feel a sense of belonging and being welcome, being part of these sites, then those other things are important as well, across a whole different range of experiences, not even just disability. But yeah, sorry, I'll stop.
Stop. It's all amazing. I'd love to hear more about what you're saying about stories and how that works.
Yeah, I think it's something that we've been thinking about a bit with our work with Weston Arboretum. So it's not that far from Bristol, and I know it's different because obviously we're thinking about urban parks in Bristol, but there are particular kind of tours that are given, and there are particular key highlights that are drawn attention to when you're on the site, and there are particular kind of histories about the site that are told. But actually, if none of those stories include the experiences of disabled people, then perhaps they won't resonate in the same way, or perhaps people will think, oh, maybe the site isn't for me because none of this stuff makes sense to me, or none of this stuff feels like how it is for me when I go there. And I think some of that stuff, I know it's difficult in a lot of the smaller urban parks, but I think when you do have a big area, and if you do have volunteers who are involved in that kind of, I suppose, that interpretation process, isn't it, of an area, it's so important that that's done in an inclusive way that looks across a whole range of different ways of experiencing it, really.
Yeah, brilliant. Dan, did you have a finger up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, my friend Jeff, who's here today, told me about an example of accessibility though in the environment, which is he went to Jeff's involved in the Ramblers, and he went to a kissing gate which said it was wheelchair accessible but not mobility scooter. It was wheelchair accessible, but he couldn't use his mobility scooter. And it's just that kind of like, you know, the fact that they didn't even bother to point out that there was a difference between wheelchairs and mobility scooters. It's that kind of sort of like not even bothering to sort of learn about the difference, because this really is important to somebody who is a wheelchair user or mobility scooter user. So if we could have more clarity on things like that, people then would have less doubt when they went out. Yes, I would be able to go there.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I wonder if something we can do as part of our plan to get a bit more of a kind of mapping of what's good where, so people kind of don't have to have that exhaustion of getting all the way to somewhere and then finding it's not accessible for them. So maybe that's the start of what we can do, and then work towards, changing it. Ruth, do you have a finger up?
Yeah, just 2 points really. Just the first thing, just following on from what Sarah said about the stories. I think it's really good and really helpful to have those sort of stories of case studies that are, on websites for parks or, places that you can go to. Because for me, what's the phrase? If you can see it, you need to see it to believe it. So if you can see that somewhere is accessible, and people have gone, they've experienced it, they've gone around, and you can, then you'll know maybe that's a place that might be more welcoming for you and like you more inclusive for people. And knowing that people have that thought, so the organisation has a thought and they're really making it clear that they are accessible, and they have the testimony as well, can give people extra confidence. Because sometimes you might see that somewhere has facilities, accessible facilities, but then you go and that might be a toilet, but then the toilet's locked, so you need a radar key to get in. So a lot of the information is quite outdated. So having a resource that has information that's provided maybe by the public or that's updated regularly, I think would be really useful and really helpful for disabled people, just giving that confidence when you went out.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put. And yeah, so one of the things we're kind of trying to play with this idea of maybe having some kind of online mapping system where people can like drop their own pins, like both to like say, here's the problem, and then we can sort of direct that problem to the people who like own the park, but also to maybe say, this was great, this worked well, come here. But yeah, so we're exploring all of that kind of stuff. Shall we move on to the next question now? So how can disabled people be more involved in decision making around nature, access and inclusion?
I think for me, you mentioned it in the beginning, saying that disabled people need to be involved at the beginning. So really shaping the agenda from the beginning and saying what their priorities are and what they feel would be beneficial. And that would hopefully include a range of people with different impairments, different health conditions. So I think at the moment, we often find that disabled people are brought in at sort of a consultation stage. So the plan's already been put together, and basically an organisation is just saying, do you like our plans? But this is what we want to happen. We just kind of have to ask you to say we consulted, but we're not actually really going to change. And it's just paying lip service to co-production. So if disabled people are brought in right at the beginning, and actually set the agenda and say what's going to be important for them, then I think that would change a lot. And like we said, if you make it accessible for disabled people, then you make it accessible for everybody. So, everybody wins.
Brilliant. Dan or Sarah, got any other thoughts?
I can add in. I think, Ruth has covered really important points there, and I hope that maybe a lot of the kind of current discussion around this idea of a green recovery and a green recovery from COVID and all the investment in green jobs, I hope that maybe that's an opportunity that actually in those greening of jobs, I'm hoping it's done in a disability inclusive way, and that in the education and skills training pathways that are being developed to create new green jobs, I hope those pathways are disability inclusive as well, because I think it's one thing bringing disabled people in to consult, but disabled people should be able to be in these roles. They should be able to be park managers and visitor experience representatives. And there's a fantastic project. It's not actually nature related, but it's led by a great collaborator called Zoe Partington. I don't know if some of you might know her, but she's developed this project with Just Boys called Disordinary Architecture. And the aim of it is to try and build the capacity of disabled artists who are interested in the built environment and spatial justice, to try and create more funded opportunities for artists to co-partner with built environment students and educators and practitioners, and to try and actually take on those roles so that their lived experience is coupled with the kind of expertise of the role to be really making these decisions and be doing these jobs with the right adjustments in place. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's a pipe dream and I'm dreaming, but I feel like that's where we should be going, so that it's properly embedded in all of this stuff.
I would just say as well, I mean, just with my outreach hat on, because just, we need more people involved in sort of the disability community within the groups. Join a different charity or a different group and talk about these things, because a lot of people say they about issues that affect them. I never talk about it because they don't speak to other people who have the same issues. And so again, if you can create if you can talk about things, get it out in the open, and then create a greater voice that can then be heard by the people who can make these decisions.
The important point, Dan. And also I should say we've got a survey open at the moment where we're kind of collecting people's thoughts on it, because we're going to be doing lots of lobbying on our plan moving forward. So we want to make sure that we are representing your views, and I'll make sure to grab that in the break and drop it in the chat. But let's move on to the next question for now then. So do any of you have any examples of creative and inclusive approaches to nature access from a disability perspective? I think, Sarah, you might have some interesting things to say on that one.
I can do. There's a couple of kind of good examples. There's one, and again, they're not in urban parks, and I guess this is kind of reflective of the challenges of investment in urban parks. I think the difficulty in getting councils sometimes to think differently about how they manage these spaces and what they're doing. But one example is from, it's a National Trust place, and it's in Worcestershire, and it's called Croom, and it's called Potter and Ponder, and some people might have heard of it, but the National Trust site, they worked with a range of children from local schools, children with learning difficulties, and an artist called William Haincom, and I probably pronounced that horribly wrong, and I'm sorry if so, but it's from an organisation called Outside In, which tries to provide a platform for artists who experience disabling barriers to the art world. But they invited all the children into the landscape, and they worked with them to try and understand where in the landscape and through what types of interactions they seemed to really enjoy themselves. They talked about these moments of sensory joy, and they had teachers there who were tracking things like smiles and eye movements and gestures and dwell time for the children who are nonverbal, to try and get a sense of what were these moments of sensory joy. And the artist then mapped these moments of sensory joy onto Croom's actual site map. So the really nice thing about this is now the children's experiences are now kind of guiding all visitors to those moments of sensory joy on the site. So they're encouraging different ways of experiencing it through their own experiences. And I think they've also done a Makaton key to go with it. And in doing that, they realized they didn't have a Makaton symbol for this idea of light and shade. So now they've got another Makaton symbol. which again sounds small, but even just how we communicate about nature, there's so many aspects of nature that we don't have Makaton symbols for, or we don't have widget symbols for, or all these different types of things. So I think any kind of collaboration that enables that vocabulary to grow as well is helpful in terms of creating those shared points of communication and understanding. So that's one example. I'll stop there, but I can go on if anybody wants others.
I love the term sensory joy. Oh, sorry, Ruth, go for it.
I don't. I was just going to say I'd like to hear more. So
Keep going, Sarah.
Okay, I will, but well, yeah, just tell me. There's another really nice example it's in Germany, and I'm sure that there are good examples in the UK as well. But I just came across this one in Germany, and it's called the Wild Kermiter Way, I think. It's in the Eifel National Park. And they've developed this whole, I think it's like a 6-kilometer trail around some of the kind of the heart of the park. And it is all kind of wheelchair accessible, but it's also got a tactile guidance system that guides you to interpretation boards where the information is there in tactile form, in audio form, in large print. So you can navigate around this environment. You can properly kind of move freely, enjoy all the different like lakeside bits, the woodlands, all sorts of different environments, and engage in the stories and the interpretation to understand what's going on there and what it all means. So that was another really nice example. And then the other one, and then I'll stop, is the project I mentioned at Westonbirt. It's still very much underway, and it's definitely been a learning curve. But we've been working with Westonbirt and Forestry England, and we've been able to recruit 4 new visually impaired volunteers who've joined their volunteer guide team. And they're now developing and designing their own sensory tours of the Arboretum. And it's funny because they did all their first public tours in autumn, in October, which were brilliant. I managed to come up for a couple of them, and they're now working on their spring tours. But the really nice thing is that because they're designing these tours and because they're leading them, it's actually now encouraging the wider guide team to think, oh, hang on a minute, I could actually include some of these sensory experiences, and I could not just look at why this is a beautiful, picturesque visual landscape and realize that there's loads of exciting textures and sounds and scents and all this sort of thing. So I think by doing that, we've identified a lot of barriers as to why it's very difficult to be a disabled volunteer at Westonbirt, but we're also being able to work together to try and gradually find creative ways of dismantling some of those. So yeah, the next set of tours will start in April. So if any of you, are interested, then please do come along. Although obviously we've realised that one of the main barriers is getting to Westonbirt because it's rural and difficult. And I got there on the school bus, and I think I was the only adult on it apart from the driver. But yeah, that just another slightly different example there. Yes.
Beautiful examples. I'm jumping on that school bus with you. Ruth or Dan, do you have any other thoughts you'd want to add on this one?
Go on, Ruth.
I don't have any good examples that I can think of at the moment. How about you, Dan?
I'm open to suggestions.
I think we had some really great examples from Sarah, and definitely my experience of doing this sort of community climate action project is, I guess, one of the disappointing things is actually there's not that many really great examples out there to refer from and things. So we're going to have to build them ourselves, aren't we? So
I can see as well there's
have any ideas, we'd love to hear them. On to my final question from me.
Oh, I was going to say, I know some parks, I mean, Page Park's got a brilliant sort of disabled gardening group.
Breaking up.
Dan, you were going.
Oh, was I? Oh, dodgy internet, was it? No, I said there's some parks, I mean, public spaces, like Page Park in Staple Hill's got a brilliant sort of disabled gardening group. And I know St. Werburgh's community centre, they've got, I mean, they do, I mean, it's even just in like plant pots in a small garden, you know, it's just nice for people. It's very therapeutic. And again, it's a nice way of meeting people as well.
Brilliant. Okay, last question for me is, if you had the power to make anything happen, what is your dream for accessible nature in Bristol?
I don't know if this truly involves nature, but a 100% accessible public transport. I think if everybody can go anywhere, that would be brilliant.
And as you said earlier, like half of the accessibility problems around parks is being able to access them. So yeah, public transport, vital there. Ruth, you have any dreams?
I think I would like to see so clear and up-to-date information about access to parks and green spaces yeah, in and around Bristol. That would make me happy. Along with some photos as well. I find photos really useful to sort of know what I'm gonna, you know, encounter when I get to somewhere.
Important point. I love that people are sharing their dreams in the chat as well. I'm afraid I've not been able to really follow the chat closely, but I'm looking forward to reading it afterwards. A break, so maybe I can pull out some of the things people have said then. But I know you're not Bristol based, Sarah, but do you have any dreams? You can be Exeter based dreams if you prefer.
No, I can dream for Bristol. Oh no, I was just getting distracted by all the lovely things coming up in the chat. I think for me, you know, I know Bristol's not perfect, but in, I guess, against the national backdrop that we've had for the last 12 years or so, I can't help but find hope in places like Bristol. You know, the fact that you have the Community Climate Action Plan and that you have, you know, a pretty strong environmental and social justice grassroots activism and grassroots movement. I feel like, you know, Bristol's in such a good place to be demonstrating how to do all this stuff really well. And so I just, you know, all the things that people have said here and all the things in the chat, just parks are there to be enjoyed. And so there shouldn't be unnecessary barriers there, especially when sometimes it takes really quite small changes to fix an access issue, like, you know, fixing a broken paving stone, or as you say, sorting out a kissing gate, or making sure that A-boards aren't blocking a route that a long cane user is using. And these things aren't difficult. So I feel like it would just be great if Bristol, and, you know, through this plan and through all the work of the Bristol Green Capital Partnership as well, if there were ways of just showing other places how this can be done and can be done really well. Yeah, I guess that's my dream.
Love it. Very much my dream too. And I kind of hope that people here on the call will join us in maybe making that happen. So that's the last questions for me. Like, I wanted to give people a break to go and grab a cup of tea or go to the loo or whatever before we have questions from the audience. So perhaps if we come back at 7 o'clock and then we'll go to your questions then. That good for everyone? See you then.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Dan.
You had your hand up. You're not on the panel, mate.
No, I don't know. Yeah.
You're not. I'm glad you got your voice back.
Yeah. I've worked it out.
I suspect that nearly everyone here would have had something useful to say. We'd had a panel of everyone, but it would have been impossible.
Yeah, I just weighed in. Nobody needs to hear me.
Yeah. All I basically wanted to say was the joy I get, because I belong to the Disabled Ramblers, a national organisation all over Britain, and we go off rambling where we can. And I can't emphasize the joy that I get out of that, going somewhere where walking people can go. And I get, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that to everybody in a minute, Jeff, because like you said, I mean, a lot of people might not know about the Disabled Ramblers.
No, that's it. But you know, if the council build it, we'll go. Don't put man-made barriers in our way. And unfortunately, because I can only talk about the physical disabilities, because that's what I am, so I can only relate to that. They put all these man-made barriers to stop motorcyclists, but they stop us. You know, and it's, you know, just take them away, just remove them, give us the opportunity to do what they can do.
I tried to get in to save it, Emma.
Brilliant. And I think the point about everyone here having some really valuable contributions, I think, is important too. And hopefully when we come back, people are very welcome to share their experiences as well as asking questions. Great to see you, Charlie. Sorry, I must have given you the wrong time or something. We've been going for a little while, but once we're on break now, but once we started again, it would be lovely to have anything you want to introduce to us with, but we're starting again in a minute.
Dan, when is the next rollers and stroll? Oh, yeah.
Should be next Wednesday at the Vassals Park, Beth.
Okay.
So I can send through to you all the dates.
Yeah.
And I'll send you through. I was going to send you a link again, wasn't I, to the online meetings?
Yeah. Yeah.
Will do. It'd be nice to see you again.
Yeah, and I haven't been to the strollers and roll before, but I would like to go to one.
Yeah, it'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
Just want to say, I don't mean to bombard the chat with nothing but Bristol City Council links.
It's brilliant, Bex. There's loads of really good stuff in there. It's fantastic.
I know. I'm a fountain of knowledge. I get many people tell me that I'm a fountain of everything IT knowledge, everything Bristol knowledge. I know weird and random things. Like I think they're planning on digging up Castle Park to go underneath to make all the tunnels and stuff into like an underground cave museum for MSHAD.
Wow.
Really important stuff to know about Bex. So perhaps we could talk about it a bit in this next section. But yeah, now people are back. If everyone could mute yourself, and we'll go back to questions. So Charlie is now joined us, I'm very happy to say. So I wonder if Charlie, would you want to talk a little bit about the great research you've been doing?
Absolutely, and I'm so sorry. I thought it was at 7 o'clock, which is entirely my mistake, but really lovely to see you all. And yes, just really sorry. Bad Monday. But yeah, so my name's Charlie and I work for an organisation called Your Park, Bristol and Bath. So we're relatively new. If you know of us, it will probably be through the work that we've been doing at College Green to introduce new wildflower meadows there. And it was actually featured in the Deaf Community Climate Action video. But yeah, we work with communities. We're all about opening up access so that everybody can experience the benefits of Bristol's parks. And I'm sure you've had loads of really rich conversations, so I don't want to kind of cover what you already have. But we've got about 1,800 hectares of public parkland in Bristol. So much opportunity. But yes, we really wanted to understand a bit more about some of the barriers that different communities experience to access green space, and just hearing some of what you were saying in the break there, Jeffrey in particular. Yeah, that resonates hugely with the kind of research that we've done, where we heard from 19 local people, and that's both people with a range of disabilities and the people and also unpaid carers. And just really overwhelming how challenging it can be to get out to a local park despite there being a relatively good kind of quantity available. And yeah, consistently we heard from people that it's really, really challenging. And despite the wonderful benefits that parks and green spaces can bring to you if you can get there and spend time there comfortably, actually sometimes the stress of trying to get there almost counters that in a really negative way, and it can always become a bit too difficult to try. But yes, the overall kind of motivation from the people that we spoke to showed that people are so committed to doing this, and they will block out entire days just to get out to one green space and try to overcome all the challenges that they come across as they go. But consistently, yes, we've heard that, first of all, getting to the park in the first instance can be really difficult unless you've got access to a private car for people with more physical disabilities. Then if you're actually within the vicinity of the park, finding an entrance, exactly that. There's lots of kind of entrances to parks which are designed to stop motorbikes, but stop anyone kind of within a certain width getting into the green space. And that's if you manage to find somewhere where there's kind of a drop barrier close to that entrance. Then when people are in the park, footpaths, massive issue. So whether there are footpaths at all, what kind of gradient they're on, what the terrain is like, whether there are steps. One really interesting thing that I hadn't thought about before was particularly for people with visual impairments, when paths get covered in mud and kind of slippery leaves that aren't cleared, it's not just about the kind of instability underfoot, it's also being able to tell when you're still on the path or not. And that has caused problems for people with guide dogs that we've spoken to, like the dog's not recognising the area that they're on. Roots making the surfaces uneven, rubbish, broken glass being a real issue, toilets coming up time and time again. How can you spend time? And lots of people travelling to parks, knowing, like going long distances to parks because they think there are toilets there and then they're not being open on the day. And actually that was one of the kind of key themes across everything, is that information is really, really crucial. And at the moment, the council website doesn't do this. There's nowhere where you can go for up-to-date information that's live about things that might have changed in the park that you're trying to go to that might affect your journey. So yeah, I mean, overall, there was just so much. And speaking to some of the people that we did, it was really quite emotional hearing about the level of commitment that people put into going to green spaces, and from things like getting stuck in between fences in a wheelchair and it taking hours to get out, and how demoralizing that is and how frustrating it is, to parents actually restricting the fluid intake of their children for the day so that they can travel to the park and not have to leave immediately after getting there to go and use the toilet. So yeah, really, really such crucial insights. And I suppose what we really want to do next with all of this is find some solutions, essentially. And I'm sure that you've spoken a lot about this, so I really apologise if I'm covering old ground, but we've got our kind of aims pretty much align exactly with what has been set out in Bristol Deaf's Community Climate Action Plan. I would love to see us where we're in a position where everyone has full access to a nature-rich park within easy reach of their home, where they can comfortably spend a really good amount of time, not just being in nature, but also getting stuck into nature activities that can enhance nature with other people. And yeah, we'd love to work with Bristol Deaf, your members, everybody on this call really, to explore ways that we can do that. And that's both through probably doing a little bit of campaigning with the councils, but we also do, as an organisation, practical projects out in parks. So exploring how we can adapt those so that we can provide really nice activities where you can get out, get your hands dirty, enhance our green spaces for nature, and kind of answer the climate and ecological emergencies close to home. So I'm sorry, that was a really whistle-stop tour. I tried to cover off as much as I could, but hopefully that tells you a bit about us and yeah, where we're coming from and why I'm delighted to be here, although apologies again for being very late.
Brilliant, glad you made it, and great, thanks for that great summary. So yeah, I'm now going to hand over to all of you in the audience who, as we've established, you've got so much expertise. You know, you should all be on this panel, but this is the chance for you to ask your questions and share any of your thoughts or expertise or ideas for solutions. Because I've got so many people pinned on my screen, it'd be really great if you could use the raise hand function, because that will make it easier for me to see who wants to talk. So we've got Ruth. Go for it, Ruth.
I got straight in there clearly before I forget what I'm going to say. You know, I'm really excited to hear what people are saying. Charlie, that some of the people have also said that about the lack of information. I'm doing a course around digital society. So in one of my projects at the end of last year, I was making a prototype of a web app, part of it, not the whole thing, I'm not quite there yet, but like part of it, for a walking group, a community walking group, and we had to make it accessible digitally. But if you're going to make it accessible digitally, then you think, well, of course, I'm going to have to put people's options to put their accessibility needs in to tell the walk leader, and then you need to know if the walk itself is going to be accessible. And then you think, well, all of those things come together. You can't separate the information and the websites with the physical space. Like, it doesn't matter if the site is accessible if you can't get into the space, but it doesn't matter if the space is accessible if you can't get accessible information about it. So I think, like, yeah, seeing the intersection of those like so clearly is really good. And my question for the panel is around fitness trackers. It's something that I've looked at in my course this year, and some people have said that a lot of disabled people or older people don't like to use fitness trackers. It's very competitive. It might take the kind of joy out of just the space, but there are some research that shows some people using sort of fitness trackers in counter-cultural ways or different ways, maybe using it to help manage how much energy they use, or using it to like say, okay, I can manage to walk this far, or when they need to sit down and have a break. And I was wondering if anyone had seen anything that sort of used that, or maybe something similar, like, I don't want to be too specific because it's a bit of a niche technology, but maybe like trackers of maps on your phone, or like pedometers or anything like that.
Definitely had participants in my research who've used pedometers, especially when they're kind of in the early days of starting to get out and explore. There's also been a kind of, as you say, the flip side of it. I used to volunteer with a walking group for people with dementia, and funder wanted evidence of the effectiveness of their walks in the terms of increased distance covered over time. And it was just nonsense, because these walks weren't really about how much distance was being covered. It was about being in a beautiful space together, having that time just to breathe at their own time, just to hang out. It was as much about the tea and coffee afterwards as it was about the walk. And as soon as we had to start as volunteers logging the distance that was covered each time, it totally undermined like the whole process. So I think if people are wanting to use them personally to get a sense of perhaps how fitness is improving or whatever, then that's fab. But I think if it starts getting used as a measure by a funder to see how effective these things are, then it starts to all get a bit skewed and maybe missing the point in some instances. But I might just have had negative experiences with that.
And go for it.
I was just going to say, I mean, again, I think obviously there is a health benefit to being outdoors and walking and everything, but it's more of the social aspect. So I would say mental health is the thing that people benefit most from. Although I personally would be interested in a tracker, because I had 2 years during COVID. I had 2 years of like sitting on the settee eating biscuits. I could probably deal with it.
I think for me, I have a tracker, have a Fitbit. Like Dan, mine didn't really get that used over the past 2 years. But when I do go out and I'm doing a walk in a green space, I enjoy being out there. I get the benefits to my mental health, but when I get the little buzz on my tracker and I know that I've done my 10,000th a day, I get like a little extra oomph there. I think, oh yeah, I've done that as well. So yeah, it gives like an added little benefit to it.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. I'm similar to Ruth, actually. I enjoy getting the little buzz. It gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling at the end, doesn't it? But I also enjoy tracking my sleep with it, which I do get a bit obsessed with, I have to say. But they can track other benefits, can't they, as well? So
any other questions? You could use the raise hand function. That would be really helpful. If you don't know how to use the raise hand function, just say I've got a question. Otherwise I won't see you. I wonder if while people are thinking of questions, Jeff, you said some beautiful stuff in the break. I wonder if you wanted to share that now. Put you on the spot now, haven't I?
Yeah, you have. All I would say, I joined the Disabled Ramblers back in, I think it's 2014, and I've had a wonderful time. I've gone to places that I used to be able to walk with my young children, but I can't do it now. But I can retrace those things, and the joy I get out of it is fantastic. It really is good. I'm very fortunate. I live on the Bristol to Bath cycle path. It's just across the road. So I can't quite get to Bath, but I can get to Salford and back quite easily. And it's wonderful. It really, really makes the day. And I just enjoy it.
Thanks, Jeff. That's beautiful to hear. I wonder if anybody else feels like sharing some of their experiences, good or bad, or anything in between.
I enjoyed going up to Dundry, and sometimes I like my really steep hills because my uncle was an avid walker, but because I'm asthmatic, going up a really steep hill like Dundry and walking through all the fields and stuff, it kind of gets to me now. And I just get really upset, and I just look out the bedroom window and I see all the hills of like Dundry and that, and I'm like, because I used to live in Withywood, so Dundry was like always within my bedroom window, and I try and get up there when I can, and when I do, it feels really nice, but it's just traversing that hill.
Mm.
And then go up at the top.
You've told us about
cows.
You told us about the Dawlish swans as well, Bex.
Yeah, going walking down along the seafront and stuff to Dawlish. And I'm at work Corella, like rebuilding the wall and the redesigning the station to make it more accessible for disabled people to get on the beach when they get off the train. And obviously Dawlish have like lots of beach walks, and Dawlish Town Council do like beach walks from like Teignmouth to Dawlish or Barbican to Paynton, and coastal walks, and forever like on the cams watching and stuff and going, I want to be there. And when I get to a certain point, my manager's like, do you need some time off so you can jump on a train? And I'm like, yes, please. I just get up and run out the office.
Brilliant. I saw a thumbs up from Gemma. Was that to say something, or were you supporting what Bex was saying, Gemma?
Just supporting what Bex was saying, that's all. Okay. And well done to everybody as well.
Brill. Do we have any other questions? What? Maybe an open question to everyone then. What would you like to, what is your dream for nature in Bristol? What would you like to see happen over the next few years?
I think if I were to answer that, I would probably go off in a very political ramble. Working in the department for the council Labour versus Greens, budget cut, etc.
These things are inherently political, so no bad thing.
But Dan knows once I start, I don't stop.
Okay.
And literally, once you mute me, I'm like, and I start swearing and everything, so I don't realise I'm doing it.
We enjoy it, Bex.
Do you?
We've got Helen.
Basically, I'm sight impaired and so unable to drive. And I think it has been brought up earlier about the fact that actually public transport in Bristol is shockingly bad. And the issue we've got is many of us probably do have bus passes, but that's irrelevant if the buses don't exist. And there's been last couple of weeks even, a lot of bus services stopping. Some of the bus services which go to slightly more remote areas, which really, to be honest, to get into the countryside, you need to be able to do that. And people stopped using the buses because of COVID. People weren't going out as much, but therefore First Bus has now got this theory that people aren't using buses. And I don't know what we can do as disabled people to make sure.
Driver shortage as well.
This is crazy.
I know. I'm like protesting College Green about bus shortages.
These are all really important points, Bex. I wonder if we could wait if we do hands up, because there's quite a few people in the room. It might be a bit complicated, but really important points. Helen, have you finished your point or? Yeah.
Oh, I suppose actually, sorry, can I just ask the panel, what do the panel think we should be doing about this? Sort the bus service out.
This is the scary question that you were not prepared for, Dan.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like you said, I mean, it's been a shocking service for years. And we just, I mean, really, I mean, from our point of view, it's kind of just listening to you guys. I mean, you know, Martin said renationalize the bus service, so that's an argument, but it's just, what do we do with the council? Yeah, we need to have more I mean, obviously, I mean, as far as sort of accessibility of buses, I mean, obviously disabled people need to have more feedback into the service. How we do that, I'm not sure.
But it seems like there's a role for potentially for Bristol Deaf there to collect some of that insight and knowledge and experiences of people to feed into the council. It could tie in nicely with the community climate action plan as well, as part of net zero commitments, etc.
Just to quickly jump in, we do have a huge transport section in our plan, but if people have more ideas, always interested to hear them, because, you know, from here is where we're going to try and actually make them happen. So the Community Climate Action Plan has 5 other partners, and we're hoping to get some money from the National Lottery to do another project that would be all partners working together, and that would be focused on public transport. So we're discussing what that will look like now. So if anybody has any ideas, this is the moment. So I'm going to be putting my email in the chat later, so feel free to give me your thoughts. Sarah, were you about to say something?
No, only just to agree. Living in Cornwall, they were like, the bus services have just got worse and worse, and it is really difficult when you're trying to get to anywhere that is not on a school route or a standard work commute, or if you're trying to travel not at school times to get to many of these places. So no, nothing useful, just to agree.
Did you want to add anything, Ruth, or we can go on to the next question?
I think transport is one of those really tricky issues, and I think we want to make the buses and public transport more accessible to people, but I guess then I don't know, I've heard bus companies say before, but say if people aren't using the transport, so why do they need to make it more accessible to them? But then if we do make it more accessible, then more disabled people will use it. But it's kind of, you don't want to encourage people to use a service that isn't accessible, just so then the companies can see that, we need to use it and we want access, so they need to make a change. So yeah, it's really difficult. I don't know, contact the council, I'm not sure.
I think that's a really important kind of assessment of how these problems tie together though. So Dan.
No, just quickly, I would say, I mean, one of the obvious things is just like, and again, with a lot of issues, it's attitudes. I mean, we did have one of our members try, a wheelchair user was trying to get onto a bus once. The driver wouldn't lower the ramp for them, and they ended up falling out of their chair and hitting their head. And again, I mean, just it's shocking attitude that somebody would put them in that position. And sort of, I don't know whether maybe the drivers need better training, management or what, but just again, it's that attitude of sort of not caring that that needs to be challenged.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Definitely one of the things we're asking for in the plan is better training and better consequences for when people aren't sticking to that training, because examples like that are just awful. I think we've got a question now from Caroline.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering whether, and I was in one of your workshops that was with people like Avon Wildlife Trust and other organisations, and I was just wondering, because you quite often see opportunities to go and plant thousands of trees to save the environment, or do hedge laying, or get involved in wildlife activities and countryside activities, but none of them are accessible in any way. And there were kind of a couple of half-hearted promises in that meeting about, oh, we'll change things and we're developing routes around our areas for access. And I wondered whether that's actually really going to happen, and whether those groups are still engaged, and whether at some point I can go to Wildlife Trust property or go hedge laying or tree planting, because none of them seem to be accessible.
So those groups are still engaged. In fact, Avon Wildlife Trust are going to have a chat with me after my holiday about a project that they're really keen to get us involved in, about something around sort of disabled people kind of reclaiming some kind of space and doing something on that front. So if you have any thoughts of what you'd like to see, I'd really love to hear that as well. But to completely agree, we need to make sure that these promises aren't empty. And I think a big part of this plan moving forward is going to be lobbying and making sure that like people don't do the usual thing of consulting and then forgetting about it. So completely hear that as well. I don't know if any of the panelists have any thoughts on how we can make sure that organisations are really doing what's needed.
No, I know, and I've come across, obviously, I did some work with Thrive in over in Berkshire near Reading, and I know that they do a lot of those kinds of activities, but they've got a community bus, like a volunteer bus, so they could go around and pick everyone up who was contributing and helping out on each day. But I don't know how that works with the wildlife trusts, or if that's something that they could look into or think about, but that seems to be helpful, because obviously then you can just go and pick people up where they're at, as opposed to people having to try and navigate, I don't know, a bus and a train to get to a pickup point, and then by that point you've already been on the go for 2 hours and you're knackered, and then you've got a whole day of volunteering to do, and then you have to do the same on the way back. So it's yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we want to do as a charity is to support local friends groups, friends of park groups, to make their activities that they currently run in their park, providing of course the park is accessible, more kind of friendly and open to a wider range of people. And there's a really good example of a group that does this quite well already in Redcliffe area. So the Redcliffe Gardening Club encourages people with a range of physical disabilities to join them, and they've got special tools and raised beds to help facilitate that and make it easy. So just to say, if any of you are in the Redcliffe area, I definitely recommend checking them out. And it's definitely the sort of thing we're going to be supporting, as I say, friends groups to change the way they do things, so that there are really hyper-local opportunities for people to get involved in nature activities where it's appropriate to do so. So do keep an eye out for that.
Brilliant. And where we've got 4 minutes left, so let's take one more question and then we'll round up. I think the next person was Martin.
Thank you very much. Yes, I chair the Friends group for Manor Woods Valley in South Bristol, and we're trying to talk to the council at the moment about removing the barriers to the nature reserve, which are inaccessible at the moment to mobility scooters. I'm aware that Bristol is developing its parks and green spaces strategy at the moment, and I just wondered if the Disability Equalities Forum is being consulted or having an input into that strategy, so that the hundreds of barriers to green spaces and their kind of removal become a priority in the strategy. If it's not in the strategy, then it won't happen. I wonder if anybody could throw any light on that, on our involvement in it.
So we have a place on some of those meetings. Unfortunately, I found their Zoom not very accessible, so I'm going to maybe need to have a conversation with them afterwards to make sure that I can input on that fully. But I think Charlie, you've got a space on it as well, and you've been feeding in these ideas too.
Yeah, that's right. And the report that we've produced as a result of our research is going to be one of the contributing documents to the development of the strategy. But yes, similarly to Emma, I found the Zoom not that easy to engage with, quite intense. But yeah, we will be inputting all of this stuff as best we can. And in our role, I suppose, as a parks focused charity, leaning quite heavily on the council to see these things change. And we've got an example actually in a project we're running in Bath at Brickfields Park, where there are anti-motorbike barriers, and those are all coming out now, which is really exciting, but it has to be consistent.
Thank you.
Great. So, and well, we've got 2 minutes left, so I want to use it to thank all of our panelists for your really great insights. I've learned so much, and I love all of the creative examples and yeah, just brilliant ideas. So thank you, Ruth, Dan, Sarah and Charlie. And I want to encourage everyone to get in touch with your thoughts afterwards about, what you want to see in these spaces, or like what you want to see done with the climate project, and would love to hear from you if you'd like to get involved. I'm going to put all of this stuff in the chat now, but otherwise, thank you so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your evenings. Have a lovely week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
I'm hanging on so I can read the chat, as I didn't get a chance to.
Oh, again, Emma, I'm so sorry. I don't know why.
No worries. No
I
worries.
opened the agenda earlier to prepare and saw 7 o'clock and didn't even think to question it in anywhere else. And just changed it in my calendar and continued on. So yeah.
It's probably my fault, because it was going to be at 7 at one point, and then my boss suggested moving it earlier. So probably somewhere there was an agenda which I failed to change.
Well, literally, this is just in one place. Everywhere else, clearly in all of your emails, it's 6 p.m. And yeah, completely and utterly my fault. I'm so sorry. I'm really sad to have missed it as well.
Sorry. Well, we've recorded it, so if you want to listen to the rest of it, then that will be coming around as well. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, and your report sounds really great. So I look forward to reading that properly and yeah, having a chat about it once I'm back back from holiday.
Definitely. What are you doing on where are you going? Are you doing anything nice?
I'm going to my bed. I was going to go to Amsterdam to see my brother, but I've had long COVID, and I think I had to kind of accept that, like, probably in the long run probably makes more sense to just use this time just to probably, you know, relax properly, and then I can see him later. Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Well, at least you got a good chunk of time off. A couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've got sort of more or less until the end of the month with a few things here and there. So yeah, mostly.
Oh well, yeah. Have a lovely restful break, and I'll catch up with you when you're back. But yeah,
Brilliant.
I'm so sorry. I'm gutted.
No, because it's that 1-7 in that agenda would have been me not changing it. So
no, it's not your fault at all. It was clear, and I should have checked it.
You know, this is a blameless situation, but yeah, great to have you for what you could make, and look.
And are you happy with how it all went? It seemed like some really good chat and everything.
Yeah, I think so. Like, it's always, I feel like every time I try and do one of these Zoom things and you're trying to like let people in and then do the slides and then talk, and then it's always like chaos, and I think I did not, but you know, I think it's not a BDF event if there's not like a little sprinkling of chaos in there somewhere. So yeah.
Oh, well done.
It went as well as I could. Thank you. And I'm going to stay on so I can read the chat. But,
yeah, lovely. Good. I was just responding to one person. Cheers.
Bye.